Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. I like this one. Let's do it. Joseph Heller once said, "Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you." What's an example from your life or history that proves it? Please remember to like, share, dance, and subscribe.
Okay, so I used to work for the government. Well, one day I told my wife that the police were following me. Of course, she said, "No, they're not. You're crazy." Well, this goes on for a couple of weeks, and I keep seeing the police following me in a marked and unmarked car. So I contacted some friends, made a couple of phone calls, and finally went up to the lead investigator in our small town. I told her, "I know you guys are following me. What's going on?" Turns out, there were some guys committing mail fraud on the computer and had just coincidentally used my name on a package. It was a name they completely made up, but it matched my name. Because I worked for the government and what I did for the government, they thought that I was doing it. I told him if I was doing it, I wouldn't have used my name. And if I was committing millions of dollars in mail fraud, I wouldn't be driving the crappy car that I was driving. It all got fixed after a couple of months. Once they knew that I knew I was being followed, they cut down on surveillance. It was just a silly little coincidence, but that was the story of how I was followed by the FBI and local police. The funny part is, I live in a small town with less than 10 police officers, so it's easy to notice when you're being followed by them. A while back, one of my best friends was interested in the same girl I was, but he kept saying he wasn't. After a while, it seemed there was something going on between them, so I asked him about it a few times. I told him I liked her, so he definitely knew what was up, and he kept denying it, and eventually started having conversations about how he was concerned about my mental health because I was acting paranoid, and kept suggesting therapy and anxiety meds. I later found out they were hooking up the whole time. He also had a girlfriend at the time, and tried to talk her into therapy when she started suspecting he was cheating. I worked with an Irish nurse. He told me a story about how he worked as a fellow that served warrants in Ireland as a contractor for the police. A man had missed his court appointments and needed to be brought into custody. They went over to the man's place and asked neighbors for his whereabouts. He was at the local grocery store, so they followed him there. They drove up in an unmarked van and proceeded to bum rush him as he was trying to put groceries in the car. Two men in black stab-proof vests, one shouting, "Stop struggling, we're not going to hurt you, just get in the van," as they manhandled this horrified stranger. The kicker was, the man had skipped out on his bail hearings because he was a paranoid schizophrenic, convinced people were coming to abduct him. When my coworker told me this story, my only response was, but he was 100% right.
So I guess if that proves him right, does that mean he was right, or does that just mean that they have some different ideas of how to get someone to court in Ireland? What do you think? Too much or not enough?
Children's mental health and special education is full of genuine sadists, also a terrifying number of save the world, one child at a time types who are almost indistinguishable from the organic sadists after they burn out. Because why else would you take a thankless, low-paying, stressful job unless there were other perks like a matching 401k, vision and dental, or unsupervised authority over vulnerable children nobody cares about? Nurse Ratched is real. Unfortunately, many inmates running the asylum refuse to believe this, and the staff treat the whole thing thin blue line style, so it's incredibly unsafe to point out, well, how unsafe you are. When I was 11 and in outpatient treatment for suicidal depression in a hospital psych ward, an older man on staff apparently resented that I was an obstacle to his grooming a 12-year-old anorexia patient by becoming his friend, so he had it out for me. Know the plane scene from Anger Management? It was a few years before that came out that he came up to me in the patient lounge one day, yelling, "Calm down," at me over and over. Everybody was confused as F, but eventually he baited me into raising my voice as I, bewildered, replied, "I am calm. That's it, call the code." I got slammed by almost a dozen staff summoned by the curb-biting code and thrown into the quiet room. Read, a padded cell, but with dried blood instead of padding. They'd wrap you in a wrestling mat to carry you down the hall, then unroll you half a turn before they ran out of the room like a wannabe SWAT team, so you could unwrap yourself. But they wrapped me too tight, and I couldn't get out. I was a 90-pound 11-year-old who was completely immobile and bawling my eyes out as I screamed for help. But these psycho cops rejects had themselves convinced this was a fiendish ploy for me to kung fu all 200 pounds of them Kill Bill style. So they taunted me from outside the room about how they weren't falling for it until I had an out-of-body experience, then passed out. While I was unconscious, my parents claimed staff told them my silence when they came to pick me up was more scheming and passive aggression. As if, again, my fiendish plan at 11 years old was to skip meals and the comfort of my own bed that night to cooperate with giving myself PTSD via this real-life nightmare instead. I passed out probably sometime around what would have been lunch. Woke up around 11, 12, or 1 a.m., now unrolled but shivering cold. Winter in Minnesota, window had a draft, room was freezing, and I refused the ability to leave, use the bathroom, not allowed to have warmer clothes or a blanket or something to wipe my runny nose. But they were happy to threaten a beating if I kept pulling out padding from the mat to use as a Kleenex from the hole in the wall in the corner of the mat, the padding already missing. I clearly wasn't the first to be put in this position. It's really shocking to look back and see how twisted and evil the people at that place were. I was a sweet 11-year-old, way too young to want to die the way I did, an abused, precocious people pleaser, desperately lacking foundational needs like safety, security, love, and belonging. And all those grown men convinced themselves that I meant them harm in order to do me harm. It's absurd. I used to work at a place where I was in a cubicle with a woman who liked to try and gossip about others to me, and of course, if someone is doing this to other people, they're probably doing it to you while you're not around. One day, she and another workmate were sitting near each other during a big meeting and acting all interested in whatever conversation they were having on a note being passed back and forth while I was nearby. I don't know why I thought this note specifically was about me, but for some reason I did. And after the meeting, I waited about 10 minutes at my desk and then checked the recycling outside the meeting room where I found the note. It was 100% about me, shit-talking me up and down. That was about the time I realized I should find somewhere new to work. Had an ex claiming all my suspicions about her were paranoia. She gaslit me into thinking everything was just my insecurity getting the better of me. She admitted years later all my suspicions were correct, and that she had done even worse things than what I suspected. There's a scene in the Netflix show Mindhunters where the protagonist suspects his girlfriend has something going on with a classmate. She acts as though his suspicions are out of line, but in the end he catches her in the act. That scene gave me PTSD. Personal. Trying to talk with my partner about concerns I had about our lack of connection, his inconsistent behavior and communication regarding our future plans, and being told I was just imagining problems and expecting too much. I went to counseling, tried to reflect on what my partner was saying, considering that I might have been asking for too much. Tried to stop asking for things as much as possible, the point that I became afraid to ask for things for fear that I was hurting my partner, being unreasonable, and that I was going to sabotage a meaningful relationship while I was working on myself. All of this only for the relationship to blow up and learn everything I was worried about actually was happening. All of it. I might be anxious, but I'm trying to reassure myself that my anxiety was in response to something not being right. It was a symptom that admittedly did add stress, not the primary problem. I felt unsure and anxious in response to clear signs of withdrawal, lack of connection, my partner not being able to or willing to work on themselves or their communication. And then they blamed me in the end as they shut down and gave up. Big mind F from someone I trusted so much. He never intentionally hurt me. I do not blame him. He has some stuff, I have some stuff. I just didn't see the big picture of how paralyzing his emotional unavailability was for the relationship. I convinced myself at the end that it was me that was destroying something great. This thought was validated when I discovered my parents illegally installed a tracking device. If you suspect one on yours, immediately check the OBD2 port on my car. They're effing lucky I didn't go to the cops over it, because that's a fine and up to 6 months jail time in my state. Parents.
So this one's a mixed bag for me. I can understand your desire for privacy, but first I'd ask how old you were, and again, not making any accusations, do you have any history of behavior that would warrant something like this? Now, I'm sure I'll get flack for it, but parents love you. Most parents do, at least, right? What do you guys think? Too much, parenting-wise?
I worked for a credit card bank and took phone payments in a call center. My supervisor treated me with complete avoidance or disdain at all times. I'm not the sort of person to react to this sort of thing, as it is a personal issue they have, but it became suspicious to me when my coworkers started avoiding me. One day I was needing to take a break, and he refused to allow me this bathroom time. He wanted to punish me for something. I finally asked him what the problem was, and with snarling teeth and glaring eyes, he said because of me, he was tortured in Ukraine when he went in there on a mission. Horrified, needed an explanation. My last name is Ukrainian, so it is my fault he ran into friction in Ukraine while he tried to push his religion on them, which was illegal in Ukraine. He was tossed into jail and supposedly tortured there. I have no idea, but to be sure, it was not my doing. So the underlying prejudice I felt was very real. He had told my coworker of his ordeal, and they too shunned me. My last day there, I went to my desk, which was in a row of desks, and I was the only one in that row. All my coworkers had abandoned being in the same row with me. I ended my employment then and there. We need to listen to our instincts. They are usually spot on. About 25 years ago, my friend was dating this drama queen, who was a real piece of work, prolific exaggerator. She claimed somebody was following or stalking her. None of us took her seriously, not even her boyfriend. A short while later, I asked some of the guys where our friend has been. They responded with, "Haven't you heard?" He caught his girlfriend's neighbor peeping through her bedroom window, and when he confronted him, he ended up getting stabbed. He's in the hospital recovering. Turns out, the girl was really being stalked. When the cops entered the neighbor's house to arrest him, they found thousands of photographs of her going back years to her early teens. The dude was obsessed with her. Apparently, the cop said this was one of the most disturbing cases he's ever seen, and she's lucky to be alive. Company offers retention bonuses because big things are coming. I asked point blank to the CEO, "Are you selling the company then?" No, just rewarding you for your hard work." No one believed me they were selling the company. Then they did 1 month later to a giant corporate suckhole. I called them liars publicly at the announcement meeting in front of the new big bosses. They were so mad but wouldn't fire me. Never trust your employer. They aren't out to get you, but they are out to drain you of everything they can. If you're being bullied, you become paranoid that your bullies are talking about you behind your back or planning on their next attack against you. Then you experience other students making fun of you, and you realize they're friends of your original bullies. So your bullies had recruited other students to make fun of you. If you're being bullied by kids who aren't even in your class, and they call you by your name while bullying you, it's a guarantee they were talking about you behind your back. If you're fired from your job, and your now ex-boss says to you, "I was hoping you would improve," which tells you that management was thinking about firing you for a while, especially if you were never told your job was in danger.
Well, the job one is probably spot on, and the bully one, I've been out of school too long to even remember. But fortunately for me, I didn't have that issue in school. But yeah, I mean, it all tracks, and it's terrible, but makes sense.
I work with adult drug users, mostly opioid use disorder, but lots of amphetamines too. Many of my clients are unhoused and suffer PTSD and have other mental health issues. These factors all contribute to the most devastating and frightening thing I see on a daily basis: sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is brutal, and one of the worst symptoms is paranoia. One day, someone is my best bud. 2 days later, they want to fight me for leading a secret years-long campaign against them. So a lot of the mental health support I provide is trying to redirect those paranoid thoughts in people so they don't get out of hand. But if you're involved in the drug trade, if you owe money to people, if you're surrounded by other paranoid and unpredictable people, if you've run afoul of the law, if the squares see you as a blight to be removed by any means necessary, if the cops see you as a punching bag, if your neighborhood has been a hunting ground for multiple serial killers, If your government has systematically and successfully waged genocide against you personally and anyone with your skin color, if you've experienced abuse, exploitation, and mistreatment your whole life, not only is it totally understandable you'd feel that way, but it's entirely possible you're correct. It's super challenging to know whether someone's concerns are genuine, and I've absolutely been wrong before.